Now, the version of Windows that you've been using up until you reach Windows 10 will largely determine how different you feel Windows 10 looks. Perhaps the most significant aspect is the way that Start behaves. It can be presented either as a full screen or as an individual menu, pop-up menu, similar to what you're used to under, say, Windows XP, Windows 7. Let's take a look at customizing Start. You can choose the following options from within the Settings app to customize Start. Show more tiles. Show the app list. That's quite typical. You'd normally want to see the app list on the left-hand side. Show recently added apps. I don't find that particularly useful. I prefer to see most frequently used apps, and I can choose that option. You can also tell Windows to occasionally show suggestions in Start. You can use Start full screen, but if you've got a device like I have, a convertible, that is one which switches from tablet to laptop mode and back again by folding over the keyboard, then Windows will automatically detect that change in the physical hardware's orientation, and that will be reflected in the way that Start is displayed to you. Recently opened items can be shown as jump lists on the Start or the taskbar. That's useful. I pin items to the taskbar such as Word, which I use often, and if I right click on the Word icon on the taskbar, I can see recently opened items. I find that very handy. You can also show which folders appear. That might be things like your documents or photos folders. I mentioned configuring tablet mode. You can configure that behavior here on the tablet mode tab in settings on the system node. The options include, when I sign in, use tablet mode, or use desktop mode, or use the appropriate mode for my hardware. That's the option I choose. And at the moment my laptop is orientated as a laptop, so I can access the keyboard, so it's in laptop mode and it displays Start as a menu. When this device automatically switches tablet mode on or off, then you can be asked what you want it to do. So don't ask me and don't switch, always ask me before switching, or don't ask me and always switch. I choose the option always ask me before switching. You can also choose to hide app icons on the taskbar when you're in tablet mode, and automatically hide the taskbar in tablet mode. You might find the taskbars less useful without the use of a mouse when you're in touch mode. Within Start, you can configure the tiles. There are a number that are created by default and they're grouped together, but you can access the apps list on the left-hand side and choose to pin things to Start. Depending on the particular app, you can do things via the More button. So for example, you can enable Live Tile, or you can resize the icon on the Start menu. We'll take a look at that shortly. The Action Center is something that you can access by swiping from the right or by clicking the little speech bubble on the bottom right hand corner of the taskbar. Frequently used icons are shown here: tablet mode, network, note, all settings, airplane mode and so on. You can configure which appear here. You can also collapse it down so that just the top 4 are shown. Go into the Settings app, and on the System node you can click the Notifications and Actions tab, and you can configure the quick actions here on the right. Windows can notify you about a lot of things. You can configure how you want notifications to behave. You can turn notifications on or off by using the option at the top here, Get Notifications from Apps and Other Senders. If you turn that off, then notifications stop. That's very useful, obviously, if you're in a presentation. You can determine whether or not you want notifications to show on the lock screen, and various other options. Down at the bottom, Get Notifications from these senders. You can also determine which apps are allowed to notify you specifically. Obviously, if you're using something like Facebook Messenger, then you might want to receive notifications from that, or you might not, in which case you can turn that off at this point. The taskbar, which appears by default at the bottom of the screen, can be customized. You can lock it, you can automatically hide it in desktop mode, you can automatically hide it in tablet mode. You can use small buttons, you can use Peek to preview the desktop when you hover the mouse over the top of an icon on the taskbar. And this is quite interesting at the bottom here. Replace Command Prompt with Windows PowerShell in the menu. If you right-click the Start button, you'll see either the Command Prompt or Windows PowerShell listed as one of the fast options. And then right at the very bottom here, taskbar location on the screen. You can also move that. Cortana is Windows 10's digital assistant, and you can configure its properties, including a microphone, And Hey Cortana, if you turn that feature on, if you say Hey Cortana, Cortana kicks in and starts responding to your requests. You can customize behavior on the lock screen. You can let Cortana access various aspects of your computer, including the calendar, email, messages, and so on. You can enable taskbar tidbits, that's suggestions. You can configure the keyboard shortcut, and you can tell Cortana to send notifications and information between your configured devices. So maybe Windows 10 Mobile as well as your Windows 10 desktop device. You can also configure the Cortana language and view the device history. Windows 10 is big on accessibility, so there are a number of related settings, 7 groups of different settings. The narrator, the magnifier, high contrast settings, closed captions, keyboard, mouse, and other options. I'd recommend before you take the exam that you familiarise yourself with accessibility options. Windows 10 supports a number of input languages. You can configure these through the Add a Language option in Settings. Open Settings, select Time and Language and click Region and Language. Under Languages, select Add a Language. Select the language you want, and then you can also use the LPK setup command from the command prompt to perform unattended or silent language pack operations. Let's take a look at a demonstration that will show you how to configure the user interface and how to configure notifications in the Action Center. Okay, so Windows 10 looks fairly similar to earlier versions of Windows now. We have a Start button down the bottom left-hand corner here. We have a desktop, of course. We have a taskbar and a notification area down here, in the system tray. This is the search box, and you can type anything into there to run a program or to search for something online or locally. If you right-click the Start button, you can access some commonly used shortcuts here, for example, Task Manager, Windows PowerShell Admin, or whatever, and this is customizable. And if you click Start, you can see a list of all the programs on the left-hand side, sorted alphabetically, and then items that you have pinned to start. These are some of the defaults. A program that you use often is well worth pinning to start, so you can easily find it. So, for example, PowerPoint here. If I right-click it, I can choose Pin to Start, and you can see it appears here. Once it's pinned to start, it's in a group. We've got some default groups here. This one's called Create, Play, and Explore. But I can give this group a name by clicking the cursor and saying, in this case, Microsoft Apps, for example. I can right-click Publisher now and pin that to start. It's appeared in its own group, but to put it into the Microsoft Apps group, I merely need to click and hold and drag it to the appropriate group. To get rid of an icon that I don't want to appear in Start, I can right-click it and choose Unpin from Start. I can also resize some of these shortcuts. If I right-click PowerPoint here, I can choose Resize and then Small or Medium. The size that's available depends on the particular app. So, for example, up here we've got the Mail app. I can right-click that and choose Resize, and you can see I've got Small, Medium, Wide, and Large. So I'm going to set these to be small. If I right-click an app, there are some options for further action. In this case, we've got the option to pin to the taskbar, or run as administrator, or open the file location. The options that you see on More do vary based on the type of the app. So here I'm going to pin that one to taskbar because it's something I use very often. And you can see that it appears down here on the taskbar. The fundamental behavior of the user interface can be changed between tablet mode and desktop mode. This is desktop mode right now. If I click Start, you can see that it appears as a standard start menu, the sort of thing that we're familiar with from earlier versions of Windows. If I click down here in Notifications, I've got an option here to switch on tablet mode. Now Start appears as a single screen. You can see the taskbar itself has changed somewhat as well. That's more appropriate to a touch device. Now, my laptop is actually a convertible. It's an HP Spectre, and it will convert between a laptop and a tablet by rotating the screen around the keyboard. Similarly, the Microsoft Surface does a similar sort of a thing. On those devices, convertible devices, it will automatically switch between tablet mode and desktop mode, and it will prompt you accordingly. You can configure how it prompts you and what the default behavior is. If I click down here, notifications again, and turn off tablet mode, it reverts to standard desktop mode. Down the left hand side you can see we have recently added programs, but you can customize what shows up at the top here. It could be frequently used apps as opposed to recently added apps. You can also see there's a bar here. This is actually indicating that this app is updating itself or is in a queue to be updated. There's quite a lot going on my network at the moment, so I've paused that. You can see which of the new apps, because they're indicated with new. Again, you can customize whether that information is displayed for you. Over on the left hand side, the far left here, we've got an icon for the currently signed in user. I can click on that and I can change account settings. I can lock the computer or I can sign out. If I have multiple user accounts set up, I can switch between them depending again on the configuration of the computer. I've also got a shortcut for settings, so I can configure the device. As we've progressed through various updates on Windows 10, the importance of settings has increased. Whereas in 1703, the version I'm looking at here, much of the configuration is done through settings. Some of it is still done in Control Panel. That's less the case with the more recent update, 1709. And so we're seeing a shift away from Control Panel and more to Windows settings. Part of what you'll need to remember on the exam is exactly where things are configured. We'll take a look at settings in a moment. There are a number of other things you can do with apps in the Start menu. If I click Start here, depending on the type of the app. So for example, these Microsoft apps here, or the apps in this Microsoft apps group, are actually desktop apps. If I right click and choose uninstall on those, I'm taken to Control Panel, Programs, Programs and Features, where I can manually uninstall the desktop app. If, however, when I click Start, I choose this app up here, CodeWriter, and right click it, I can choose uninstall, and then it prompts me this app and its related info will be uninstalled. That's because it's a Microsoft Store app, and so the uninstall and install procedure is different. It's handled through the Store app. I'm not going to uninstall that right now, just leave that. There are a number of other things that we can customize. Let's take a look, for example, at customizing the taskbar. If I right click that and choose taskbar settings, I can choose to automatically hide it in tablet mode, use smaller buttons, define where it appears, and then I can also configure select which icons appear on the taskbar and turn system icons on or off. So let's have a look at select which icons appear. So at the moment you can see that down the bottom right hand corner we've got power showing. I can turn that off and you see that it disappears and reappears. And I can also choose system icons. At the moment the clock is turned off, but you can turn on or off the network or power and so on. So there are a variety of things that I can customize about the way that the taskbar looks. Whilst we're here, I can also make some personalization changes. If I click on the background page, for example, I can, at the moment I'm using a solid color, but I can change that to a picture, solid color, or a slideshow. I can then choose colors. I can configure the lock screen. I can wrap that all up in a theme and then choose a theme, and there are a number that are available by default. And then perhaps more usefully, on the Start button here, I can click options to show more tiles on Start, show the app list in the Start menu. Typically you're going to want to see all of the apps, but you can turn that off. At the moment, if you remember, it's showing recently added apps, but I can turn that off, and instead I can turn show most used apps on. And then the behavior of that will change. As you see here, most used is now replaced recently added. Perhaps the next most useful thing to look at is notifications. If I click that on the bottom right hand corner here, you can see a standard set of shortcut buttons that are used to access the most useful configuration options, things that you want to access quite quickly. We already looked at tablet mode, but you can turn on or off networking, you can switch into airplane mode, you can access your VPNs, that sort of thing. So those are things you're going to use quite frequently. You can collapse that down if you want to. or you can even customize it. Up the top here in the Action Center, we would have a list of notifications. There are none at the moment, but let's take a look at how we can configure notifications in the Action Center. I click on All Settings and go to System, Notifications and Actions. Here I can customize the quick action buttons. I can also turn off notifications from everything, specify whether notifications are shown on the lock screen, hide notifications when I'm duplicating my screen. That's useful, of course, if you're doing a presentation or something. And then for individual applications, I can specify the behavior. So we've got, do I want to get notifications from Battery Saver or from OneDrive? Now, there aren't very many listed here because I don't have very many applications. But for example, if I installed Facebook or Messenger or something like that, then I could control that notification behavior from this list here. In the demonstration, you saw how to configure the user interface and how to configure notifications.